Welcome to the Strategic Risk Mind podcast. I'm your host, Joe Anderson with Fortify Risk Management. And it's our privilege today to have Dr. Roger Hall join us. Thank you for being here. And we're very excited to kind of delve into some of the areas in risk management that he plays in, which are just fascinating. He deals a lot with the mind and how it operates and how it works and how people make decisions, which I think is fascinating. So, Dr. Hall, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself, kind of your family, what some of your interests are, so we get to know a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I'm married. I have 3 adult children who live in another state. My wife and I love to be outdoors. So if we have the opportunity, we're going to figure out a place to go for a hike and usually take our dog along. So those are the kinds of things we like to do.
Great. And it looks like you have a psychology doctorate from Ohio State in 91.
Yep.
And you also did some work with University of Utah, Ball State, and you worked part-time at a church for a while. And you've authored 3 books, one of which we have here, DIY Brain, which I'm excited to read. And you do a lot of consulting. So tell us about, just a quick summary of your consulting practice and kind of what you work with businesses on.
Yeah, so I am a business psychologist. I'm in the subset of psychology that does peak performance psychology.
Okay.
And most people, when they think about peak performance psychology, they think of a sports psychologist.
Yeah.
Everybody's heard of a sports psychologist. And what a sports psychologist does is work with elite athletes and their teams to help them perform better on the field.
Mm-hmm.
I use many of the same techniques, strategies, tactics as my colleagues in sports psychology. My audience are business owners and professionals.
Okay.
So I work with elite business owners and professionals to help them as individuals perform better in their workplace and in their life, and help elite work teams work better.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you find that some of the things that you're working with them on have carryover back and forth between like their personal life and their business work?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm roughly speaking in the leadership development field, and somebody said, what is that? And what leadership development is, it's personal development for people in leadership positions. So it carries over because if you're having trouble at work, you're going to have trouble at home. If you're having trouble at home, you're going to have trouble at work. So you're the same person everywhere. So one of the pieces of feedback I often get when I'm working with leaders at work is they go, this is really good at work, but it's really helping me at home. Like, yeah, I know.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. We talk about business resiliency and being agile in the marketplace and having those resiliency skills. And when you build that and you train on that in business, it carries over into your personal life, right? And you're very thoughtful. And so it's a similar concept. Well, you and I were just talking about judgmental heuristics. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
How they apply to risk. And so I wanted you to kind of tell our audience a little bit about that and what those are, because it's a mouthful.
Yeah, so it's
what it means.
Yeah, so it's a really fancy term, judgmental heuristics, and it was an area of study in psychology that was kind of invented by 2 researchers in Israel who then came to the United States, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky.
Yeah.
And Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in 2002 for the application of this work to finance. Dr. Tversky had passed away before that, so they don't give Nobel Prizes posthumously, but the work was theirs.
Wow.
And so, you're getting Nobel Prize stuff today, because I'm here for you.
I like it.
But judgmental heuristics is a really fancy way of explaining the mental shortcuts that we use just to get through our daily life.
Okay.
And we couldn't live our life without having decision-making shortcuts.
So give us a couple examples of mental shortcuts we use. I mean, I can kind of think of them.
Well, okay, so my favorite one is at the grocery store. There's a heuristic called the representative heuristic, which means that if something is a member of a class, we assume it has all the same qualities of the same class, which is kind of hard to understand until you think about this. you're on the peanut butter aisle.
Yeah.
And you're choosing peanut butter. You figure, what's the brand of peanut butter that you buy? Skippy.
Yeah.
So chunky or smooth?
Chunky.
So you go down the aisle, you see Skippy, chunky, and then what size do you buy?
The largest.
The largest, right. Okay. And so there are a bunch of shortcuts that you're making right now. Number one, you're assuming that this jar of Skippy, chunky, is the same as the last one you got.
Okay.
You just assume it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so it's a mental shortcut. Now, you buy the biggest one. Why do you buy the biggest one?
Because I have a big family.
You have a big family. Many people have the shortcut of the biggest jar is cheapest per ounce.
Yeah.
Right. And so you don't even look at the price anymore.
Uh-huh.
So what you've done is the first time you ever go grocery shopping, you got a lot of decisions to make. Like, wow, Mom always bought Skippy chunky, but maybe I should get Jif or Peter Pan. And so you have a lot of decisions to make. But as soon as you decide on one thing, you assume that it's going to be the same forevermore.
That's amazing. You just unlocked something for me right there, because now I understand why my 13-year-old son asks so many questions, because it's his first time doing a lot of the pieces that I've already done before.
Exactly. So let's say the reason we have these shortcuts is, let's say every time we went to the grocery store and we were buying peanut butter, we had to evaluate all of the jars of peanut butter.
Yeah.
And we had to evaluate all of the pricing, size per, price per ounce. How long would it take for us to get through the grocery store? We'd never get out.
Yeah.
So now we walk down the aisle, we see the blue lid on the Skippy, we
Okay.
toss it in the cart, and we keep moving.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what judgmental heuristics do for us.
Uh-huh.
Except sometimes the shortcut breaks. So we have the mental heuristic, the representative heuristic, that the bigger jar is cheaper per ounce.
Yeah.
Until it's not.
Yeah.
Because the retailers know that you're not looking at prices once you've checked it out. You have the mental shortcut that I'm going to get the biggest one. It's going to be cheaper per ounce.
I see.
So, for example, one time I was with my family and I went down the aisle. I was getting Cheerios because my kids love Cheerios.
Yeah.
And I noticed that the small box was cheaper per ounce than the big box.
Huh.
And so I went home with like 4 small boxes. My kids go, "Why'd you get the little box?" I said, "Because it was cheaper per ounce." They go, "How? That's weird."
Yeah.
Okay, so we couldn't survive without it, but there are always exceptions that trip us up. Now, this is a small example, but in bigger examples, we can really get into trouble.
Yeah, where there's more on the line, or there's a bigger potential impact.
Yes.
And you talk about risk management and how people deal with situations that require attention, intention, thoughtfulness, as far as like, what's the safest approach here? What's the riskiest approach versus how do I quickly get to the next thing? And now I can see how judgmental heuristics can be a challenge.
It is. And in the field, they said they called it decision making under uncertainty, which is exactly what happens when you're assessing risk. Is you're making decisions without knowing the full outcome.
Yes.
And not knowing if it's going to be the same this time or next time. And so there are lots of ways we can get tripped up.
That's fascinating. It's interesting because, when we're dealing with a situation we're familiar with, like you were talking about, you make preconceived things that may not be there. And we were talking with some of our consultants about situational awareness in safety. And when you enter a room, what are you checking out? And, one of those consultants is former Army. And so he's talking about, like, this is drilled into me. Every time I enter an environment, I'm always checking these things.
Yes.
But it's like, we're not wired that way in the standard population, maybe as much.
Right.
And so it's like, well, how do we train that? How do we help people move in that direction so that they're not making all of the assumptions, but they're taking the 5 seconds it takes when you enter a room to really check out what the safety issue is. And it's fascinating to think about.
Well, so we make trades all the time.
Yeah.
Which is the 5 seconds worth the mental effort to do if I'm going from my bathroom to my bedroom?
Yeah.
And I was just in my bedroom. So if I go from my bedroom to my bathroom and then back to the bedroom, do I need to sweep the room? Do I need to check my routes of egress?
Yeah.
But if we want people to be aware of it, it is a cognitively effortful process. In other words, thinking burns calories. In fact, our brain occupies between 3 to 5% of our body mass, but consumes 20 to 25% of our calories.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So this brain disproportionately uses calories. And so we're burning calories. Well, our brain is designed to be efficient.
Yeah.
So it's gonna not want to burn as many calories as possible. And it's going to want us to get through life without having to decide on everything because it's exhausting.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're exhausted if you make too many decisions. So there's a trade-off of we will most of the time be safe if we enter every room as if it was occupied with people who want to kill us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Is that a good trade-off?
Is that realistic? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we would be exhausted if we went through every room doing that. Now, there are times when you want to turn that on, and then there are times you want to turn that off.
That's right, like a new environment.
New environment? Yes.
You're a home health provider.
Mm-hmm.
You're going into a new place. You got to turn it on.
You're going to turn it on. You're going into your home after being away for a while. You might want to turn it on.
Yeah.
But after you've been in your home, going from your bedroom to your bathroom, back to your bedroom, you can probably turn it off.
Yeah.
And we just wouldn't get along in life if we had to be vigilant all the time.
Yeah, so a lot of, I kind of synthesize on what we're talking about here. A lot of it is knowing when the appropriate time is to turn off the judgmental heuristics that are automatically operating in our brain.
Yeah, and they're operating for our benefit.
Yeah.
But there are times when you want to turn them off. When you want to spend more time in cognition, when you're wanting to decide more clearly, you want to think about it more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. I think we live in a world where everything's fast, everything's quick. We have high expectations of things, and sometimes consequences aren't always real because you play video games or you watch movies or you see things, and the real consequences aren't always presented, right? Or you can have another life, or you can, you don't have the impact of the decisions, and so I think what happens to this concept of judgmental heuristics is if we don't realize what potential consequences are and we don't have to interact with those, then we just let it run on autopilot. And it's like, well, no, there are real consequences to some of these decisions. We have to be discriminating in which ones we're going to let autopilot run on and which ones we're going to actually look at a little bit more specifically.
So we because of our circumstances and another couple shortcuts I'm going to tell you about, we misperceive risks. Like we'll overestimate certain risks and underestimate other risks.
Okay.
So let me run you through and I'll tell you what I've done to you at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're at the beach.
Yeah.
What's the most likely way you're going to die at the beach?
I don't know. Drowning.
Drowning. Great guess.
Okay.
Not correct. You want to give another try?
Heart attack because there's too many beautiful women around.
Actually, not the cause, but the result.
Okay.
So we'll get to that in a minute. What I did, and I got you to talk about drowning, is I did a thing called priming.
Yeah.
I set your brain for a certain expectation, which is I'm at the beach. So your brain immediately started thinking about beach-related deaths, drowning, jellyfish sting, shark attack, sunstroke, riptide. I mean, you start thinking about those things because it's called priming. I set your brain to think about a certain thing.
Okay.
Now, the reality is the most likely way you're going to die at the beach is heart disease. And not because of the pretty girls. It's because you're most likely to die of heart disease anywhere. So do you see how if I direct your attention to a certain thing, I can direct your assessment of risk incorrectly?
Interesting. Very interesting. Now, can this work with like my wife when she wants to spend a bunch of money shopping? Can we prime her not to do that?
There's a really
no, I'm just messing with you.
No, but I mean, I can prime her the other way.
Yeah.
So there was this really interesting experiment where they had students go into a shopping environment as an experiment. Everybody got $20, and you go around and you could buy. It was college, so they had like sweatshirts and T-shirts and hats with all kinds of swag with the university logo on it.
Yeah.
And they were trying to get the students to spend as much of the money as possible. It was all cash, and give the least amount of change.
Okay.
So what kinds of things do you think they could do to increase spend of $20 of cash? So people say, well, buy one, get one free, clearance, on sale, 30% off. All of those things are good answers, but it was a much more subtle way that they got people to spend more money.
And what was that?
At the cash register. Now remember, this is all cash.
Yeah.
They've been given $20 to spend. At the cash register, there was a MasterCard Visa logo. That was the only change in the intervention. And if the MasterCard Visa logo was there, then the students as a group spent more money.
Really?
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Now, what they think is the reason is that when we spend with MasterCard and Visa, we don't look at the price.
Yeah.
When we spend with cash, we're very aware of the price.
Because we have to interact.
Right.
That's fascinating. Huh.
So there are ways you can prime people to spend more money. I can't help you with your wife to spend less, unless you make her spend with cash.
I'm going to send you to the Rogers School of Spending Less. No, just joking. My wife does a great job.
Man, I'm going to be in so much trouble.
I'm just messing with her on the show here, but yeah, it's so interesting, and I think when we look at risk management, a lot of times people take the risk and they put it in a corner and they cover it up and they don't want to deal with it. What's the risk of a supply chain incident happening to my firm? What's the risk of a key person going down? What's the risk of a bad social media post? What's the risk of a product hurting somebody? But we don't want to talk about those things because we're so focused on making money and running our operation. But there's these little pieces here that we have to take pauses for, just like your judgmental heuristics needs to take a pause every once in a while. And it's like they just don't want to do it because it's not fun. And I think some of the things that are fascinating to me is I've found as I talk with people, they don't want to admit they don't know, number one.
Yes.
And they don't want to admit that though they don't know how to solve what they don't know. And so those two things are very difficult. And so we've done a lot of work on like what are the steps to get them to take incremental steps instead of having you just admit this whole area is wide open. Because otherwise it's like it's a shock to the system. But it's so important for businesses, right? I mean, be able to plan ahead, think about risk. And I was curious to see what your thoughts are on that as far as like how that decision making happens in a business executive where they just decide to ignore certain risks in the business. And then how do we help them address those in a way that's going to be a good experience for them mentally, which is interesting.
Well, let's answer the first question first, which is how do you get them to pay attention to certain risks?
Yeah.
One of the judgmental heuristics is how easy it is to imagine the risk.
Okay.
So if we were to say, and this is why movies and video games are important in this discussion, is because we can imagine risks in video games and movies because video games and movies always have dramatic risks.
Yeah.
So it's not that your dishwasher, if you're thinking about flood insurance, you're thinking, okay, the dam is going to break and it's going to carry all this stuff and it's going to destroy my house. You never think that the dishwasher is going to spring a leak and that leak is going to last over a long week when you're away on vacation. That's right. And it's going to drain into your basement. I mean, you don't imagine that. Mm-hmm. Well, you do now because I just primed you for it. But we don't imagine non-dramatic,
yes,
unsafe environments. So part of what a risk professional does is to train people to look at the data. What's most likely? And actuaries, risk managers, and insurance companies, they all know what the data is.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of presenting it in a way that's easily remembered, because people in businesses, they're so busy with other things that if you give them a boring risk profile, they're not going to remember it. It has to be done in a way that it's going to put it in the top of their mind.
That's right. And sometimes it can be on a large scale disaster, but it can still, you can look at the data on what's most likely in that large scale disaster. I'll give you a quick example. We did a lot of apartment insurance for a while, and we had a group that we did some analysis on what are the most common fires, in a home or apartment, and it's a stove fire.
Stove fire, yeah.
And so, we found this little tuna can that you can put on the top of underneath your grill that drops powder. When there's a fire, has a little wick on the end, it burns the wick, it drops the powder, and it puts out the stove fire. So I was talking to these guys. I'm like, look, these fires burn up a ton of your apartments. You know, what if we installed this as a simple remedy? But there was never any intention on that because they hadn't done the analysis, right? And so the data really drove, okay, here might be a solution that doesn't cause as much damage for us, right? In this fire scenario, and I think it's similar to what you're talking about.
It's exactly that, because they're not imagining the frequency of the fires. They're imagining lightning strikes or forest fires. They're the tiny little problems tend not to be easy to imagine. So part of the job of a risk professional is to use data and then make easy to imagine the more common risk factors.
That's right. And so when we put controls in place, or we put preventative systems or these things in place, it allows us to reduce those losses. But it also does something other very fascinating. It creates a perception of elevated risk management, or perception of excellence in risk management, which that perception then impacts how everyone views your company. And it's fascinating.
But see, that's a mental shortcut as well.
Yeah.
Oh, he or they did a good job on this one thing. They must be awesome in everything. I mean, that's a shortcut. Yeah. And it usually works.
That's right.
But we can use them to our benefit or to our detriment. Can I give you a fraud example?
Yeah, please.
So most of us, when we think about fraud, we think about Enron, these ginormous frauds.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
What we don't typically think of is that the person who is handling cash pockets it and then does something else to cover that up that costs the company more. I'll give you an example. A doctor's practice.
Yeah.
Group of doctors, this was many, many years ago, and I'm aware that this was a true event, that their intake person, their receptionist, would take their copay. And if people paid their copay, $20, in cash, she would not log any of the procedures done that day, because that would trigger the insurance. The doctors never did an audit on any of the cash payments. So if I came in and you were the receptionist, I gave you $20, I would get my blood work for free. Because she would never submit it to the insurance.
Oh my goodness.
She, over the course of 20 years, embezzled about $54,000 in cash, but cost the company in the neighborhood of $5 to $7 million.
Unbelievable.
And they never caught it. So nobody thinks, oh, she's going to pocket $20 and then not bill the rest of it.
That is so crazy.
Now, what we think of is there's some CFO who's working some evil genius plan, because that's what we see in the movies. We don't see, your cousin's mother-in-law doing this because she's family. She comes to Thanksgiving, but it happens a lot.
That is interesting. That's such a great story.
It has the added benefit of being true.
Yeah, I know. It's fascinating. And you hear these stories, you're like, really?
Yes.
It happens that way. Yeah. And I think, when we think about risk, it's important to realize that, when underwriters look at risk, when they're underwriting a policy, or when investors look at risk when they're wanting to invest in a project, the things that they do see, they multiply in their mind, and they multiply in funny ways. Like we did an analysis on a work comp policy, and we could show that for every 5 small claims, there was 1 big claim.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, okay, well, the underwriter can see this too. So do you realize that you can say the small claims don't matter, but they do?
Yes.
Because they predict the big claims.
Yes.
And I used to joke with my clients that ingrained on an underwriter's forehead at birth is frequency predicts severity, because that's the way they always think. And it's like, well, if you know this about them, then you need to think about, how do I reduce frequency, right?
Right. So how do you unwind that rule that they have in their head? Frequency predicts severity.
Yeah.
That's a heuristic.
Yeah. It's fascinating, but this area of perceived risk is fascinating to me. I think, some of that deals with how we deal with our processes and procedures and the things that we set up to manage risk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of that has to do with how we view it, right? And how you view it. It's a mind process for the most part.
It mostly is a mental set. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it's fascinating to kind of be okay with. And I think that's one of the things that we try to work with our clients on is, how do you be okay with not always knowing the answer to the risk that you're facing, but bringing in a team that can help you with that and may have experience. So there's like a, I don't know what it is, like a wall or some sort of hump they have to get over in their mind to be okay with talking about risk and not always knowing the answer. And once we can get there, it's a lot easier to help, because now you can just open the door and go, okay, well, here's this guy and this is his experience. Because we all have, there's the skills are out there in the world, and with professionals, you could find people that have been through experiences just like you're talking about, this claim or whatever it is. But it's like, we don't want to ask because we don't want to act stupid. And it's like, well, no, that's actually smart to ask, right? So how do we get that flipped for our clients is a fascinating, conversation, I think.
Well, part of it is humility, but let me before we get to humility, I want to talk about a thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
In space, but not.
Okay,
not
so the Dunning-Kruger effect is that when amateurs look at pros
mm-hmm.
doing a thing, they look at it and the pro makes it look really easy.
Yeah.
And they go, how hard could it be? I could do that.
Yeah.
And so when somebody in the risk area, they're good at their job, they look at the risk professionals, they go, that's not too hard. I can figure out what's dangerous.
I see.
And that's what an amateur does.
Uh-huh.
And so they overestimate their ability until they get more experience, and then they realize, I don't know anything. And then they have to work to become an expert. Now, once they become an expert, they look back, the experts look at the amateurs and they go, like, this isn't that hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, why can't you get this?
Yes.
And so they forget, experts, and you're an expert in risk, you forget all of the things that you learned.
Yes.
And you look at the amateurs in the risk area and you go, why don't you understand this? It's so obvious. So part of it is remembering all of the steps that you had to go through to learn. And for amateurs to have humility to say, I may be good at some things,
mm-hmm.
but I can't be good at everything.
I love that. It's one of the reasons we're getting ready to launch our threat simulators. And when we talk with our risk consultants, they're super excited about that, because it's really hard to train for and practice a disaster, because you don't want to actually do that to yourself, right? You don't want to have the building burned down. So it's like, okay, how do we train for this? And we've come up with fire drills. But what's a fire drill for supply chain? Or what's a fire drill for some of these other kind of disasters? And how do we drill that so that we are mentally prepared to make good decisions? And so these threat simulators give us an online way to do that, which is fascinating. What we found is we actually had one of our consultants talk about what happens to your brain in a disaster, mm-hmm. and how you go into this fight or flight instinct.
Yep.
You can't think logically.
Right.
And so afterwards you go, man, I should have done it this way. Right. And it's like, well, why couldn't I think of that then? Well, it's because it's the way your brain works.
Your brain shuts down all the logical advanced planning stuff because it doesn't need it when it's dealing with an immediate crisis. And so what literally happens is our field of vision narrows. You can't see anything in the periphery. that literally happens to your vision in a crisis. It narrows, but it also happens with your thinking. You can't think of anything creative because that's not necessary. You're focused on the immediate problem at hand.
How do I live today?
How do I live today?
Yeah.
So there's a wonderful book called The Survivor's Club by Ben Sherwood.
Okay.
And the percentage of airplane crashes that the fuselage breaks open and there is fire, how many of them are survivable? That doesn't mean everybody survives, but how many of those crashes have survivors?
I don't know, maybe 50.
Yeah, it's like 85%.
Okay.
So what people immediately, their mental reasoning, their mental guessing is, I got about a 50-50 chance maybe. Yeah. No, it's really about 85% chance that someone is going to survive. Now, depending on the luck of the draw, where you're sitting and where the fuselage breaks, you're not going to make it. If we look at those who survive, the first hurdle they have to get over is unbuckling their safety belt. Now, why is it that when you get on an airplane, they always rehearse how the safety belt works? It's like, I do this every day in the car. I know how to use the safety belt.
Yeah.
Until you're hanging upside down in a broken airplane with smoke and fire, then you forget.
That's right, because your brain's not working the same
way. Right. But if you watch the flight attendant, that mental rehearsal will actually enhance your chances of surviving, as will reading the seat back pocket card.
Okay. No more taking a break when the flight attendant.
No.
Roger's telling us here. He's laying the law down. I love it, though, because that does rehearse your mind. That's very
right.
good. Yeah.
Because mental rehearsal, if we look at the research on mental versus actual rehearsal is almost as good as actual rehearsal.
Interesting.
So the more you rehearse it mentally, even if you don't engage in the behavior, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to do the behavior.
And that's why simulators are so effective for flight.
Exactly.
For pilots, is they run in simulators.
Right.
Because they can mentally rehearse it.
Right. So if you've created simulators for people, they can then mentally rehearse how to deal with the supply chain disaster. And I can't even, I'm too much of an amateur to even know what that would be.
Yeah. It's kind of fun. They're a little bit like an escape room experience. It's kind of fun. We try to create it and make it interesting, but it's just so interesting to think about all these things because we don't always take time to think through, okay, what's actually happening when a disaster happens? What's actually happening on the plant floor from a risk standpoint when we bring a new employee in, when we have vendors come in? What are those things that I need to be paying attention to and really focus in on? And then how do we pre-plan our approach to those so it becomes more automatic instead of just having to catch it every time, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. And so habit formation, which is, your military example at the beginning. Well, the military is fantastic at creating habits because they just drill. Yeah. And part of what makes for a less risky environment is how much rehearsal are you doing? How much are you practicing it?
I love it. This has been so good. Roger, I really appreciate your time. And I want to kind of end with just a fun question. What's one of the riskiest decisions you've ever made? So let us know.
The riskiest decision I ever made is I was working at a summer camp, and there were wild dogs in the summer camp. Okay. And the camp manager left for a week, which doesn't make any sense, and he put another guy in charge. Weird. And so we all lived in a trailer. The three of us guys who were working at the camp, and the guy who was put in charge wakes me up in the middle of the night.
Okay.
And he says, the wild dogs are out. And he hands me a rifle. And he says, we're going to go kill them tonight so they don't kill any of the campers. And so there I am in the back of a car, carrying a rifle, bouncing into this clearing. And he says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to drop you here, and you stay here. And then me and this other guy, we're going to circle the dogs and we're going to drive them to you. And then when we get them in the clearing, we're going to shoot them.
What a great plan.
Yeah, except they're over there. I'm right here in the dark with my back against a tree. I'm 5'10". They were 5'10", 6 feet tall. Yeah. Dogs are about, 2 feet tall. I'm thinking in the middle of the night, these wild dogs are going to be in a clearing. It's pitch black. I can't see my hand in front of it. And we're going to be firing rifles.
Not a good plan.
Somebody's going to die.
Yeah.
I'm here. Nobody died. But I realized the pressure that I felt to conform as a young adult got me to go along rather than telling that guy, you're an idiot. Well, the next night when he asked me to go out with him, I said, I'm not doing it. I'm done with that because I learned my lesson.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about getting shot in the middle of the night.
That's right.
So he went out another night with the other guy and they shot these wild dogs, which turned out to be the neighbor's farm dogs. So he killed one of the neighbor's farm dogs that was just out running.
Oh my goodness.
So that was the most dangerous decision. I nearly got shot by some guy trying to kill farm dogs.
Incredible.
Yeah.
That is a good story. It's interesting. We can all look back in our lives and go, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that.
It was totally a stupid decision. Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I appreciate you coming on our show and just some really interesting information and conversation, expertise on how our mind works. So thank you for taking time today. This has been another episode of the Strategic Risk Mind podcast. I'm your host, Joe Anderson. We have our guest, Dr. Roger Hall. Please join us next time. Thank you.